It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime, a celebration of hard work, success, and the excitement of new beginnings. Natalee Holloway, an 18-year-old high school graduate from Mountain Brook, Alabama, was preparing to start her next chapter in life at the University of Alabama. But before diving into college, she embarked on a senior trip to the sunny paradise of Aruba, along with 124 classmates. This picturesque island, with its turquoise waters and bustling nightlife, was the perfect backdrop for young graduates looking to let loose after years of academic dedication. On May 30th, 2005, the group's trip took a dark turn. That was the night Natalee vanished without a trace. What began as a celebratory vacation turned into an international mystery that gripped headlines and broke hearts around the globe. Aruba is a small Caribbean island known for its pristine beaches, luxury resorts, and vibrant nightlife. It's also renowned for being a relatively safe tourist destination. Mountain Brook High School had been sending graduating seniors to Aruba for years without incident. But in 2005, the class of Natalee Holloway would forever change that perception. The group stayed at the Holiday Inn, spending their days enjoying the beach and their nights frequenting local hotspots like Carlos and Charlie's, a popular nightclub where tourists and locals alike mingled over music and cocktails. On May 29th, their last evening in Aruba, Natalee was seen dancing and drinking at Carlos and Charlie's. It was the last time her classmates would see her alive. Around closing time, Natalee left the club with 3 young men: Joran van der Sloot, a 17-year-old Dutch national, and 2 brothers, Deepak and Satish Kalpu. She willingly got into their car, reportedly saying she wanted to see the beach. According to witnesses, she was intoxicated, but she seemed to be enjoying herself. When Natalee didn't show up for her flight home the next morning, panic set in. Her packed bags, left untouched in her hotel room, suggested she had intended to return. Her disappearance launched a desperate search by her classmates, the Aruban authorities, and eventually the FBI. From the start, suspicion fell on Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpo brothers. Joran was a charismatic and handsome teenager who lived on the island with his family. A frequent visitor to the casinos and nightclubs, he was well known for his smooth-talking demeanor and penchant for preying on tourists. Initially, Joran claimed he and the brothers had dropped Natalee off at her hotel around 2 a.m. He later changed his story multiple times, creating a web of lies that only deepened the mystery. One version claimed Natalee fell ill on the beach and he left her there, assuming she'd find her way back. Another story, more sinister, suggested she was sold into human trafficking, a claim Joran later recanted. As the search for Natalee intensified, the case became a media sensation. Joran's inconsistent stories made him the prime suspect, but the lack of concrete evidence left authorities at a standstill. The Aruban police arrested Joran and the Kalpo brothers multiple times, only to release them due to insufficient evidence. The American media, led by networks like Fox News and CNN, descended on Aruba, turning the case into a sensationalized soap opera. Joran, ever the manipulator, used the attention to his advantage. He gave interviews, each more bizarre than the last, spinning tales that kept him in the spotlight while providing no real answers. In 2008, Dutch reporter Patrick van der Eem befriended Joran, gaining his trust by posing as a drug dealer. Using hidden cameras, van der Eem recorded Joran's latest confession. He claimed Natalee had died accidentally on the beach, and her body was disposed of at sea by a friend named Dory. This confession seemed to offer the breakthrough investigators needed, until Joran retracted it, claiming he had been under the influence of marijuana and lied to impress van der Eem. Once again, the case hit a dead end. While Natalee's disappearance remained unsolved, Joran's violent tendencies came to light in 2010. In Peru, he was arrested for the brutal murder of Stephanie Flores, a 21-year-old woman he killed in a hotel room after she discovered information about Natalee's case on his laptop. Joran pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 28 years in prison. His arrest in Peru reignited interest in the Holloway case, but Joran continued to deny involvement. Despite his conviction for Stephanie's murder, no concrete evidence has ever linked him definitively to Natalie's disappearance. In 2012, Natalie Holloway was declared legally dead by an Alabama court. For her family, it was a heartbreaking acknowledgement of what they had feared all along. Natalie, the bright and ambitious young woman who had her whole life ahead of her, would never return. Her disappearance serves as a haunting reminder of how quickly joy can turn to tragedy. What was meant to be a celebration of Natalie's hard work and achievements became a nightmare that continues to resonate nearly 2 decades later. Aruba, once a paradise in the eyes of her classmates, became the backdrop for a mystery that remains unsolved. And Natalie Holloway, forever 18, remains in the hearts of those who loved her and the minds of those still seeking justice. Hey, sorry for the quick interruption, but if you enjoy these stories, it would help me out a lot. If you smash that like button, it helps to push these videos out. If you subscribe, that would be great. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and if there's any stories you would like me to cover. Right, back to the story. Every town has its secrets, its eerie mysteries that linger in hushed whispers long after the sun sets. But what if one of those secrets came with a warning, an unmistakable feeling of doom that wouldn't let you rest? Let's talk about premonitions. You know, those unsettling feelings that something bad is about to happen. Maybe it's the voice in your head telling you not to walk down a certain street, or a sudden gut instinct about a person you barely know. Premonitions go beyond intuition. They're vivid, unnerving, and almost impossible to ignore. For Cindy Anderson, her premonitions weren't just feelings. They were nightmares. The same horrific scenario played out in her dreams again and again, leaving her paralyzed with dread. In the nightmare, Cindy was at her desk at work, going about her usual duties as a legal secretary. There was a knock at the door. She got up to answer, only to find a man she recognized standing there. At first, everything seemed fine, until it wasn't. His demeanor turned sinister. He began tormenting her, chasing her through the office until he caught her, and then he killed her. Cindy's premonitions were so vivid they left her shaking in the mornings. Her sister remembers her crying in their mother's arms after one particularly bad dream, screaming, "He murdered me, Mom!" This wasn't the reaction of a child scared of the dark. Cindy was a grown woman, 20 years old, and typically calm and composed. But these nightmares rattled her to her core. The Anderson family, devout Christians in Toledo, Ohio, didn't know what to make of it. Sure, Cindy's nightmares were unsettling, but what could they do? They were just dreams, or so they thought. Despite the darkness that plagued her nights, Cindy's life was in a good place. She was saving up money while living at home, preparing to attend Bible college with her boyfriend. She worked as a legal secretary at a small law firm, a job she enjoyed, at least at first. About 10 months before Cindy's disappearance, something strange happened. One morning, as she sat down at her desk, she glanced out the window at the building next door. Spray painted on the wall, in large bold letters, were the words, "I love you, Cindy, by G.W." Now, some people might have found this flattering, but Cindy wasn't one of them. She didn't know anyone with the initials G.W., and the message felt invasive, almost stalker-like. Her co-workers didn't know anyone by those initials either. For 6 months, that graffiti stared back at her every day. The property owner eventually removed it, and for a while, life returned to normal. But then, it happened again. The same message appeared on the wall, bigger this time, more brazen. Whoever GW was, he wasn't going to be ignored. And then the phone calls started. Almost every day, Cindy answered the phone at work to hear a strange man on the other end. He never introduced himself and would say disturbing things. What, exactly, has never been disclosed. Cindy started hanging up as soon as she realized it was him, but the calls kept coming, sometimes multiple times a day. Her co-workers were so concerned that they started keeping the office door locked at all times. An emergency buzzer was even installed at Cindy's desk, just in case. On August 3, 1981, the day before Cindy disappeared, a client named Larry Mullins came into the office. While he was filling out paperwork, the phone rang. Cindy answered it, immediately hung up, and looked visibly shaken. When the phone rang again moments later, she repeated the process. Larry asked her if she was okay, and Cindy brushed it off, saying, "It's just some weirdo who keeps calling." But Larry wasn't convinced. She looked terrified. So much so that he called the police when he got home, urging them to check on her. Unfortunately, they never got the chance. The next morning, August 4th, Cindy arrived at work around 8:30 a.m., as usual. Witnesses saw her at 9:45 a.m., but after that, nothing. When her bosses arrived around noon, Cindy was gone. The lights were still on, and the door was locked from the inside. Her car was in the parking lot, locked as well. Strangely, there was a faint smell of nail polish remover in the office, but no bottle or explanation for it. Cindy's purse and keys were missing, but she hadn't left a note saying where she was, which she always did if she stepped out. Even more unsettling was the book she'd been reading, left open on her desk. It was a dramatic romance novel, and the page it was open to described a woman being abducted at knife point. The police were called, but there were no signs of a struggle. Cindy had vanished. As with any unsolved case, theories abound. 1 month after Cindy disappeared, an anonymous woman called the police. Whispering, she claimed that Cindy was being held captive in the basement of a White House. She said the house was one of two, side by side, owned by the same family. The parents were out of town, and their son was holding Cindy against her will. The caller refused to give her name or an address and hung up. When she called back later, a detective tried to listen in on another line, but she realized it and hung up again. She never called back. Police searched for White Houses that matched the description, but found nothing. Then there's the graffiti. A janitor with the initials GW who worked at the strip mall was questioned, but cleared of any involvement. Later, another man came forward claiming responsibility for the graffiti, saying it was meant for a different Cindy entirely. His story checked out, and he too was cleared. There's also speculation that Cindy ran away to escape the strict confines of her religious upbringing, but her family and boyfriend strongly refute this, pointing out that she left behind her car, her money, and her social security number, which has never been used since. And then there's the most chilling theory of all. Cindy may have been a victim of something far darker. In 1995, nearly 14 years after Cindy disappeared, her former employer, Richard Neller, was indicted for his involvement in a drug trafficking ring. During the trial, a witness testified that the ring's leader, Jose Rodriguez Jr., had confessed to killing Cindy. Rodriguez allegedly believed she had overheard sensitive conversations about their illegal activities and murdered her to send a message to Neller. But this confession was never substantiated, and Cindy's case remains unsolved. Perhaps Cindy's nightmares were just that, nightmares. Or perhaps they were something more. Maybe on the day she disappeared, her worst fear came true. She heard a knock at the door, recognized the man standing there, and let him in. What happened after that is anyone's guess. Cindy Anderson's story is a haunting reminder that sometimes our instincts and dreams might be trying to tell us something. If you ever find yourself experiencing a premonition or a recurring dream that feels too real, don't ignore it. It just might save your life. Picture this. A quiet family vanishes without a trace, only to be discovered years later as skeletal remains. Their mysterious deaths have sparked countless theories, ranging from cult rituals to supernatural forces, and even connections to criminal organizations. But what's the real story? Buckle up, because today we're diving into the chilling and perplexing case of the Jameson family. Bobby Dale Jameson, 44, his wife Sherilyn, 40, and their 6-year-old daughter, Madison Stormy Star Jameson, disappeared on October 8, 2009, in the rugged Sands Boy Mountains of southeastern Oklahoma. Before their fateful trip, the family had been living in Eufaula, Oklahoma, leading what many described as an isolated, almost reclusive lifestyle. Bobby, a self-employed businessman, had an intense interest in spirituality and the paranormal, which some say bordered on obsession. Sherilyn, too, reportedly dabbled in esoteric beliefs. Together, they were planning a fresh start on a 40-acre plot of land in the mountains. But instead of a new beginning, the family walked into a mystery so baffling it still haunts investigators and armchair sleuths alike. On that October day, the Jamesons were reportedly scouting out the property they intended to purchase. Witnesses saw them in the area, but no one else seemed to be around. Their truck was later found abandoned, eerily locked, with their malnourished dog, Maisie, still alive inside. Inside the truck, investigators found Bobby's wallet, Sherilyn's purse, their jackets, a GPS unit, and a staggering $32,000 in cash hidden under the driver's seat. They also discovered Bobby's cell phone, which contained a photograph of Madison taken the day before they vanished. This photo, a haunting snapshot of the little girl looking uncomfortable, has fueled speculation that it might have been taken after her parents had already met their fate. Now, here's where the theories start piling up like pieces of a puzzle that just don't fit. 1. Cult connections. One of the most talked about theories is that the Jamesons were murdered by a cult. Sherilyn's mother, Connie Cocoton, believed the family was targeted by a religious cult operating in southeastern Oklahoma. She even claimed Sherilyn had been placed on a hit list by this mysterious group. Further adding to the intrigue, investigators discovered a witch's Bible in the Jameson home. However, a close family friend dismissed this as a joke, saying it was something Sherilyn had bought for laughs. But then there's the matter of Bobby's alleged dabbling in a satanic Bible and strange graffiti found on their property. Could they have gotten involved with the wrong people, or were these signs of deeper personal struggles? 2. Drugs and the Mexican cartel. Early on, law enforcement speculated that drugs might have played a role. The family's strange behavior, captured on their home security cameras, only added fuel to this theory. In the footage, Bobby and Sherilyn appeared dazed, repeatedly walking back and forth to their truck with empty hands, as if in a trance. But here's where it gets murkier. While no drugs or paraphernalia were found at the scene, southeastern Oklahoma is known for methamphetamine activity. Some believe the Jamesons might have crossed paths with dangerous individuals involved in the drug trade, potentially even the Mexican cartel. If true, this could explain the large sum of cash found in their truck. Was it payment for something, or maybe a ransom that went horribly wrong? The KKK. Another sinister theory suggests the involvement of white supremacist groups, such as the Ku Klux Klan. Oklahoma has a history of such organizations operating in rural areas, and it's been suggested that the Jamesons, being an unconventional and private family, might have been targeted. Sherilyn's outspoken nature and her purchase of a hate sign meant to intimidate a neighbor could have put her on someone's radar. Could the family's deaths have been a hate crime disguised as a disappearance? A family feud. Bobby's father, Bob Dean Jameson, also became a prime suspect. Bobby had filed a protective order against him just 6 months before the family vanished, claiming his father had made violent threats and was involved with gangs and prostitutes. Bob Dean denied any involvement, and while investigators didn't have enough evidence to charge him, the family feud left a bitter trail of suspicion. Murder-suicide. Sherilyn's mental health also raised questions. She was bipolar and had a history of depression. Investigators found an 11-page hate letter she'd written to Bobby, and her gun was missing from the truck. Could Sherilyn have snapped, killing her husband and daughter before taking her own life? This theory gained traction but ultimately couldn't be proven, as her gun was never found and the skeletal remains offered no definitive answers. 6. Lost in the wilderness. Some believe the family simply got lost in the dense, unforgiving terrain of the Sans Bois Mountains. Perhaps they succumbed to hypothermia or an accident. But with temperatures mild at the time, this theory also seems unlikely. It wasn't until November 2013, 4 years after their disappearance, that the Jamesons' skeletal remains were discovered just 3 miles from their abandoned truck. Hunters stumbled upon the remains of 2 adults and a child lying side by side. Due to the state of the remains and animal activity, The cause of death couldn't be determined. The coroner's report only deepened the mystery, stating that their deaths were under suspicious circumstances. And that's where this case stands, unsolved. Was it a cult ritual, a cartel hit, or simply a tragic accident? Did the KKK or a vengeful father play a role? Or is the answer hidden in those eerie, grainy security tapes of the family's final moments at home? The truth is, we may never know what happened to the Jameson family. But one thing's for sure, their story continues to captivate and confound, leaving us with more questions than answers. When it comes to unsolved mysteries, most of the time we're left with missing people or unanswered questions because those involved simply can't explain their disappearance. Either they're missing or no longer with us. But the Tromp family, they turned that expectation on its head. Every single one of them was found, yet their disappearance remains one of the strangest mysteries in modern Australian history. Let's dive into the bizarre and unsettling story of the Tromp family's road trip into chaos. The Tromps were, by all accounts, a normal, hard-working family. Mark and Jacoba Tromp lived with their 3 adult children, Rihanna, Mitchell, and Ella, in Sylvan, a small rural town just outside Melbourne. The family ran an 18-acre red currant farm and an earth-moving business. Neighbors described them as workaholics, always busy, always focused, and entirely devoted to their work. But nothing about them seemed unusual. That was until August 29, 2016. Without warning, the Tromps piled into Ella's silver SUV and vanished, leaving behind their phones, passports, credit cards, and any semblance of an explanation. All they took with them was a small pile of cash. From the outside, it looked like they were fleeing something or someone, but the truth would prove far more confusing. When relatives couldn't reach the family, they grew worried and called the Victorian police. What officers found at the Tromp farmhouse only deepened the mystery. The house was in disarray, as though someone had been frantically searching for something. Passports and credit cards were strewn across tables. The family's other vehicles were still parked with the keys in their ignitions, ready to go. It was as if the Tromps had dropped everything and fled in a panic. Then came the strangest clue of all. Mitchell, the middle child, had broken the family's no phones rule and brought his mobile along, but only briefly. About 30 kilometers from home, the phone was tossed out the car window. Police later found it on the roadside, abandoned. It seemed the Tromps believed they were being tracked. In the months leading up to their abrupt departure, there were subtle but growing signs of paranoia, especially in Mark and Jacoba. Friends and neighbors noted that the couple seemed increasingly convinced that someone was after them, perhaps trying to steal their money or even harm them. By the time they left, it seemed this fear had consumed them entirely. The Tromps' road trip wasn't exactly a well-thought-out plan. They drove aimlessly for hours before eventually arriving in Bathurst, nearly 800 kilometers from their farm. By the next morning, cracks in the family's unity began to show. Mitchell, seemingly the most skeptical of the paranoia gripping his family, had had enough. He left the group and caught a train back to Melbourne, leaving his parents and sisters behind. The remaining Tromps continued their journey, heading to the Jennylin Caves, a tourist hotspot in New South Wales. But tensions must have been high, because later that morning, the 2 sisters, Rihanna and Ella, also decided to leave. Unable to convince their parents to return home, the sisters took matters into their own hands. They stole a car and drove to Goulburn, where they reported their parents missing. It was in Goulburn that Ella and Rihanna made yet another strange decision. They separated. Ella drove home, becoming the first family member to return to Sylvan. When she arrived, she found herself swarmed by police and reporters, all desperate for answers. The media had picked up the story, and the mysterious disappearance of the Tromps was making headlines across Australia. Mitchell, too, eventually made it home by train. Together, he and Ella expressed confusion about what had happened, but were more concerned with finding the rest of their family. That same day, Rihanna was discovered in the back of a stranger's utility truck. The driver, Keith Whitaker, had been on his way to a doctor's appointment when he felt a kick against his seat. To his shock, Rihanna was curled up in the truck bed, completely catatonic. She had no idea where she was or how she'd gotten there. Keith called the police, and Rihanna was taken to a psychiatric facility for care. This bizarre turn of events captivated the public even further. The Trump story was now national news, with headlines speculating on everything from cult activity to shared psychosis. Meanwhile, Mark and Jacoba had made their way 600 kilometers south to Wangaratta. By this point, the couple had also separated. Jacoba, disoriented and agitated, was eventually found wandering in the town of Yass. Like her daughter, she was taken to a hospital for evaluation. That left only Mark, who seemed to be the most consumed by paranoia. Reports emerged of a man fitting his description tailgating a couple in Wangaratta. When the couple pulled over, Mark stopped as well, stared at them, and then bolted into a nearby park. Around the same time, police discovered evidence of a break-in at a local motel where someone had apparently spent the night. Was it Mark? No one could say for sure.